You know, some of you know this about my background, but so I played baseball most of my life and actually got drafted by the New York Yankees out of high school. I didn't end up signing with the Yankees because I got an opportunity to play baseball at Stanford University, where I went to Stanford, played there, pitched in the College World Series. Then I got drafted by the Kansas City Royals and signed a pro contract. Unfortunately, my third season in the minors with Kansas City, I injured my pitching arm, and my career ended when I was in the minor leagues. So I had to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And it was the late 90s at the time. I moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area where I'd grown up and where I still live now with my family, and I got a job working for an internet company during the dot-com boom days. And I worked for one company, then went to another company. We were all supposed to get rich because the company was going to go public, and then the dot-com bubble burst and I lost my job. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and I had a mentor of mine ask me a question. He said, well, Mike, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I said, well, if I could do anything, really what I'd want to do is speak to people. I'd want to try to help people, inspire people. It was hard for me to even articulate what it was. I knew what it was inside, but I was sort of embarrassed to say it out loud. And he said, oh, you want to motivate people, you want to inspire people, why don't you go do that? And I said, well, because I'm too young and I don't know how to do that, and who would listen to me? And he said, well, that's kind of a dumb excuse. And I said, really? And he challenged me. He said, if that's really what you want to do, I challenge you to figure out a way to do it. He said, you could wait 20 years or 30 years until you think you're ready, or you could just do it now. It's up to you, Mike. And the job market at the time in the Bay Area was a little bit tough, given the dot-com bubble had burst and a lot of people were losing their jobs. So I made a declaration the first day of 2001, and that was that I'm starting my business. I was going to be a motivational speaker. I didn't know how one became a motivational speaker, but that was my intention. So I started meeting people and I started reading books, and one of the things I decided to do is I signed up for some classes at a place called the Coaches Training Institute to learn a little bit about what's now known as life coaching and business coaching, which has become a pretty big industry in the last 10 or 15 years. Back 11, 12 years ago wasn't a big industry, but I signed up for these courses, and I found out that the first weekend course I was going to take, I was going to come to a conference, a little bit smaller than this conference, but a bunch of people that I wasn't going to know. And I was reading a book at the time about how to make your goals happen, how to make your dreams happen, and one of the things it said was you got to sort of act as if it's already happening. You got to kind of fake it till you make it. So what I decided to do is I went and got some business cards printed up that said, Mike Robbins, motivational speaker, right? Now, I wasn't even sure if I was going to have the courage to hand out the cards at the conference, but I thought if I get the courage, I will hand one out. I probably won't add the part that I haven't actually given a motivational speech yet, but I'll see how it feels. And so the meeting was going on, and I handed out a few cards, and you know, over the course of the weekend, I made friends with some people. I networked like you guys are going to do here at the next few days of this conference. And one of the women that I networked with at that conference, and we really kind of hit it off, told me that she worked for a company called Sutter Health, which out on the West Coast is a lot of hospitals and medical centers. And her job for Sutter Health was in training and development. So she hired speakers. And I thought, wow, I got her card. And I remember thinking, you know, if I actually get this business off the ground, I'll give her a call in like 6 months or a year. She'll be a good contact, right? So anyway, about 3 weeks after the weekend conference I had been to, I get this frantic phone call from Christine, the woman that I had met who works for Sutter Health. She says, Mike, oh, I'm so glad I got you on the phone. Listen, I have an issue. One of our hospitals, up in Sacramento, Sutter Medical Center, they have a huge meeting next week, and their CEO called me all stressed out because their speaker just canceled, and I told him, don't worry, I got a great guy. I said, yeah. She said, so here's the deal. He's going to call you in like 20 minutes, but do me a favor. Don't tell him that I've never seen you speak because I told him you were awesome. And I'm like, okay, I get off the phone. I don't have the heart to tell Christine, I'm not quite ready yet. So I'm in my apartment waiting for the CEO of this hospital to call me back. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to say to this man when he calls me? Because the first thing I'm sure he's going to ask, one of the first questions is going to be, who have you spoken for? I'm going to say, nobody, and he's going to hang up the phone, right? So I decide to myself, okay, I am not lying to this man. But if he doesn't ask, I'm not saying anything. That's what I decided, right? So anyway, he calls me on the phone, get on the phone, I'm super nervous, and it turns out he didn't ask me the question. Turns out he's a big baseball fan. So we start talking about baseball. We have this whole long conversation about baseball and teamwork and life and everything, and by the end of the conversation, he decides to hire me and like pay me money to come and speak to his 200 people 6 days later to give a 90-minute presentation on the keys to creating a championship team. And I actually said yes to that and got off the phone and didn't know if I should scream or cry because now I had to figure out how I was going to come up with a 90-minute presentation in 6 days. Over the next 6 days, I did everything I could. I'm reading books, I'm calling people, I'm praying, I'm doing whatever I can to think, how can I possibly do this? I get to the meeting. I'm standing in the back of the room when they're introducing me, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience. My heart was beating so loud, I thought the people around me could hear it, right? I was like, oh, I'm walking up to the front of the room thinking, just don't fall down, man, you know. And I get up right to the front of the room. I turn around to talk. I have no idea what I said for like the first 5 minutes. I was so scared. I was like out of my body scared. But somehow or another, I made it through those first 5 minutes. I think I had them pair up and talk about something just so I could catch my breath. And then after that, we came back and I started to calm down a little bit. And over the course of the next 90 minutes, which when they asked me to speak for 90 minutes, initially that seemed like 90 hours. I'm thinking, how is that possible? I started to actually have a little bit of fun. And it started to seem like some of it was resonating a little bit. And towards the end of the presentation, there was a big clock on the wall in the back, so I knew exactly I had about 5 minutes left. And I remember thinking, I wonder if these people have any idea I've never done this before. I mean, I had spoken before publicly, but never been brought in as the motivational speaker. And when it was over, I had one of those moments. You ever have those moments in life where you're sort of impressed with yourself? I was like, hey, that was pretty cool, you know? I was really excited. I was proud of myself. I had been very, very nervous, and it actually had gone well. And as I was in my car driving from Sacramento back to San Francisco, which is about a 2-hour drive, I kept thinking to myself, how did I do that? I want to do that again. I want to do that better. And the only things that I could come up with in the car ride home, what did I do? There were 3 things that came to my mind. The first thing that I tried to do as best I could, even as nervous as I was just be myself. The second thing I tried to do was just talk about the things that I know about. Not pretend like I knew a bunch of stuff that I didn't know, just what did I know? And the third thing I tried to do was just connect with those people in that room, those 200 people who worked for that hospital that I didn't know much about them or their life or what it's like to work at a hospital, but I just tried to connect with them on a personal level, human being to human being. And I thought to myself, maybe those 3 things are important. And over the last 12 years or so, as I've had the opportunity to work with so many amazing organizations, like Gap and Sears and these big companies, small companies, professional sports teams, people that bring me in, those 3 things are still the 3 things I try to remember every time I stand up, just like I'm standing up here tonight. And I think those 3 things are really important for all of us as it relates to our lives and our careers. To be ourselves, talk about the stuff that we know about, and connect with people on a personal level. The tendency for us in life, and it doesn't matter, by the way, as far as I can tell how old you are or how much experience you have, is to get into situations, particularly the ones that scare us a little bit, and then think, I got to do something different. I got to act a different way. I got to stand up. I mean, there are things we can learn to do better, and you learn certain things. You got coached today about how to do interviews. That's important skill. But here's the best piece of coaching that I've ever gotten about interviewing and trying to impress people. That is, just be you. You don't have to rehearse to be yourself. You just have to trust that being yourself is enough. And that's the biggest challenge for all of us. So think for a moment right now in your own life, wherever you are. And there's a big range in this room of where people are in life, right? But in your own life, what do you find, honestly, makes it difficult or challenging to be yourself? To express yourself? Why don't you turn back to your partner who you were talking about? Just briefly have that conversation. What makes it difficult or challenging to be yourself authentically as we're talking about it? What makes that difficult? Okay, so what do you think? What makes it difficult or challenging to be yourself, to express yourself? What do you find?
Yeah, I would say Deron finished with Central University. Being accepted by others, I tend to kind of change myself to fit in to the environment or the people I'm around. Maybe if I'm in North Carolina, I'm born in New York, I maybe kind of feel like I gotta change up a little bit because I'm here with these people. It's more fast paced, so I'm kind of like getting out of my comfort zone a little bit. So sure. I would say being accepted.
Absolutely. You said Deron, is that your name? Deron. How many can relate to what Deron's talking about? Yeah. And look, and this is one of the things, here's an interesting thing about this one, Deron. There's what I call a light side to that quality and a dark side. The light side to the quality of wanting to be accepted, those of us who have that ability, it's what we call people skills. It's what we might also call emotional intelligence. You can kind of walk into a room and sense the room and figure out How can I make sure that I'm accepted and people like me here? Right? It's an important skill to have in life, in business. You want to be able to get along with lots of different people. The dark side of it, and I know this one as well, is that what we can then do is sell out on ourselves so as to hope people accept us. Right? And all of us, for a variety of different reasons, have learned how to do this from a survival standpoint, if you will. So it's just something to be mindful of. And by the way, you do, from my experience at least, there's aspects of it that you outgrow or that things change, but for the most part, it's part of being human. And it's something that we all deal with to some degree or another. And the more we can start to look at it and confront it, the better. Because again, while there's a good aspect to it, there's also challenges. Because yeah, we want to be accepted. We don't want to do something that's going to have people not accept us, not agree with us, not like us. What else? Thanks for saying that and being honest about it. Yeah.
Patrick Williams from Lincoln University, New York. What I would say is like at times you're probably not satisfied with yourself, and you let others impress you. Yeah. So pretty much you try like to imitate them, try to be better, and at times you forget your self-values and just like not being yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely, right? So it's that comparison to other people, right? And then value yourself based on that. Absolutely. Anyone relate to that one? Yeah. We compare ourselves, right? Which is always a trap, because no matter what, if you compare yourself and I think, oh, I'm better than you, oh, he's better than me, she's better than me, all of a sudden it's like we don't really get a sense of where we fit in all of that, right? Yeah. Oh, I think Keith has microphone. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. Shalom, Gardner, Stony Brook University. One of my biggest flaw is self-doubt. I get intimidated. Like, even on this conference at first, I was speaker level because I was like, I'm a sophomore, everybody's going to be so much more experienced. And one thing he told me is that just be yourself. I fell in love with you over the interview, so everybody else will fall in love with you if you just be yourself and don't be intimidated.
Yes. Absolutely. Tell me your name again.
Shalonia Gardner.
Shanoni?
Shalonia.
Shalonia. Shalonia. Thank you. Yeah, how many can relate to that? The self-doubt. You know, one of the things, Shalonia, it's an interesting, I call that little, you know that little voice in your head? Anybody got that little voice in your head? That little critic? The little gremlin? A couple of you are thinking, what's he talking about? I don't have a voice. That's the voice. No. Okay, so that little voice, right, it shows up, and especially if you come to an event like this, or you walk into a room or you meet new people. And look, I'm a people person. I love people. I mean, this is what I do for a living is meet people. And the moment I walk into a room, even like tonight, immediately, my initial tendency is I want to walk over to the side, right? Because the little voice says, they won't like you. They'll judge you, right? And so most of us have some version of that that goes on in our head. And we learn how to overcome it, which is fine. But one of the things you can do, if you choose to, is you can start to play with that a little bit. You don't have to let that little voice run your life, because that little voice runs most of our lives. It decides what we can and can't do, how successful we can or can't be, who we can talk to, all that kind of stuff. And we listen to the voice, and we think the voice is the truth. But we got to start to learn over time that it's not. And it takes some courage to actually confront that. You know, I grew up in Oakland, California, and one of the things I learned early on, Duran, like you were talking about, was how to get along with people. Because a lot of the kids that I grew up with, just like a lot of you in this room, didn't look like me. And so as odd as it may seem, as a white male, I found myself in many situations where I was the only one who looked like me. And what was interesting about that was that there were a lot of assumptions or projections made about me, and playing sports with some other kids. And a lot of the kids I played sports with just assumed, because of how I looked, that I must have come from some kind of privilege or some wealthy family or something. Because most of the kids in the community where I was who looked like me, that was the case. But that wasn't the case. So for me, it was an interesting challenge. And I also wasn't a very tough kid, but was playing sports in some pretty tough environments. So I had to learn how to act like I was tough when I wasn't really tough. Right? So I didn't get messed with. I learned how to talk, and I learned how to run. Those were two very important skills. Okay? That's what I did. But what was interesting for me, so I spent most of my youth and most of my teenage years then being in that environment. Then all of a sudden, I go to Stanford. And it was like the exact opposite. And the experience that I had personally was I realized, wow, I didn't feel like I was accepted or I fit in where I came from. And then where I went, the same experience. And the challenge then for me was to start to look more deeply within myself of who am I really? Not in relationship to everyone and everything else. right? Because walking even into this room tonight, as honored and humbled as I am, and I was here last year, it's intimidating. And there's a level to which that if we can all start to have more compassion, if you will, more empathy for ourselves and our own fear, you know what happens? Instead of us becoming more afraid, it actually gives us more freedom. It gives us more confidence.